was born on the 3rd of February, 1967. She was a 16-year-old British hairdresser in training, and she lived in Nottinghamshire, United Kingdom. On the last afternoon of her very young life, Colette spent the time preparing and baking cakes at her family home in Keyworth, Nottinghamshire, a large village 6 miles from the center of Nottingham. At 8 p.m. on the 30th of October, 1983, Colette left home to visit her boyfriend's house. He would normally pick her up from her house, but his car was currently in the shop for repairs at the time. So she walked to his house instead. The 1.5-mile walk would typically take her about 25 minutes, but by 10 o'clock that night, Colette had not arrived, and 2 hours was way too long of a time. She should have been there well within the hour. So once she didn't arrive 2 hours later, the alarm was raised. Phone calls were made between Colette's boyfriend and her family before they realized something bad must have happened. They initially feared that Colette had become involved in an accident, and her family and friends began searching for her along the route that she would have taken to get to her boyfriend's home. But the cold bite of the October night provided a hindrance. Police would put out a missing persons report, but they did suspect that she may have visited a friend's house along the way, but all of her friends reported that they had not seen her. Again, her family thought that perhaps an accident may have happened, but they were nowhere near prepared for the truth. At 9 a.m. on the 31st of October, Halloween morning, Colette's naked body was found in a field a mile away from where she had been abducted. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled to death, with her body posed in a sexually provocative manner. When the missing persons case turned into a murder investigation, police increased their manpower and began seeking information from locals. Colette had last been seen 10 minutes after leaving her home when she stopped to talk to a group of friends. 10 minutes after that, a resident in a nearby house remembered hearing a woman scream, but was unsure if the scream came from children playing around and just messing around, or there was a genuine cry for help. This same resident remembered hearing a car drive off immediately after, but did not give it much thought after that. Crime scene investigators collected as much evidence from the scene of the crime. At the time, though, police had very little to go on with only minimal forensic evidence and no direct eyewitnesses to the abduction or a suspect. Because of this, the case went cold rather quickly, much to the public's anger, and this puts Keyworth on the map for all the wrong reasons. 9 months after this transpired, in June of 1984, the BBC released the first episode of a crime reconstruction and appeal program called Crime Watch. Colette's murder was notable for being the very first case to be featured on this show. The format of Crime Watch was to reconstruct as much information of a crime as possible in the way that was agreed upon by police. Now, as a result of this new program, Nottinghamshire police received 400 calls, some of which claimed to have seen a car leaving the village at high speed. And fortunately, this program allowed police to eliminate over 1,500 suspects. But aside from wiping the suspect list and various other tips, most of the calls that came in because of this program really led nowhere, and the killer had seemingly got away with it. The case would be run a second time on Crime Watch's 20th anniversary show in 2004, but again, this case was still as cold as ice. However, in 2008, because of advances in DNA technology, police were able to use the carefully protected forensic evidence from the crime scene and put together a DNA profile of the killer. While all of this was going on, they appealed for members of the public to report anyone they thought might have been involved in the murder decades ago. The appeal didn't work, but in June of 2008, the DNA database returned a hit, which immediately did not make sense. A man called Jean Paul was arrested on a traffic offense, and a DNA swab was taken at the police station. His DNA was a near identical match to the murder suspect profile drawn up by forensics. The police had their man. After 25 years, they felt like they could finally seek justice for Colette's murder. Except Jean-Paul had been born 5 years after the murder took place, which instantly ruled case and learned that Jean-Paul was the son of Paul Stewart Hutchinson, which is why the DNA profiles were so similar. And with this newfound discovery, police would arrest the then 50-year-old Paul Hutchinson at his home the very same day. But Hutchinson, ever the confident man, had already developed a story to get the police off his scent. He claimed that the true suspect was his own brother, who had passed away 6 months earlier and had been cremated. Now, fortunately, the police are smart enough to not just take somebody at their word, especially when it comes to such a high-profile case. So the police would go to the hospital where his brother was staying before his death, and they had taken blood samples, and upon analysis determined that these blood samples did not match the DNA profile of the killer, and they knew that the DNA had to have been Paul Hutchinson's. At the time of Colette's murder, Paul was 25 years old, and he was a youth worker who had a liking for younger girls. On the day of her murder, he had spent hours in a shed near a writing school close to the village, waiting for girls to start walking home alone. Paul's heinous plan was to lure one of them into the shed and assault her. He had already approached 2 girls that morning who told their families a man had acted strangely around them. This would be reported to police only after the murder became public knowledge, but by that point, Paul Hutchinson was long gone. When he had failed to select a victim, he stole a Ford Fiesta and drove around like the backcountry roads, hoping to find a girl walking out in the darkness alone. And at around 8:20 p.m. on October 30th, he pulled up next to Colette and proceeded to speak to her before jumping out of the car and abducting her at knife point. He would bundle her into the back seat of his car and smashed a bottle over her head before driving to a secluded location. At this location, he would assault her and would hit her again with the bottle multiple times before strangling her to death. After he murdered Colette, he moved her body to the middle of a nearby field and posed her body for reasons that never became known. Many people suggest he was attempting to trick police into thinking he was a serial killer, and that if he posed the body a certain way, the police would think they were looking for someone else. Now, Hutchinson, though, didn't stop there, and out of a morbid curiosity, had returned to the village to watch the police investigation amidst the supposed anonymity of the crowds on the 31st of October while wearing a Halloween mask. A few days later, he sent a letter to police that read, quote, "No one knows what I look like. That is why you have not got me. You will never get me." End quote. And for many years that letter proved to be true, but under the old adage of never say never, justice would finally catch up with him 25 years later. In January of 2010, 26 years after Colette's murder, Paul Hutchinson was convicted and sentenced to a minimum of 25 years, one for each of the years he believed he had gotten away with the murder. A week after his sentencing, Crime Watch returned to the case for a third time. With the new evidence and the killer behind bars, Crime Watch put out a new show featuring the case. In it, they were able to retrospectively look at the inconsistencies with their original program and point out errors that had been made. They also discovered errors in the media's reporting of the murder, including that Hutchinson was a psychology graduate, which he was not. Some of the inconsistency in their original programming may have resulted in Hutchinson getting away with the murder at the time. Now, 10 months after his conviction, he was suffering from depression more than he ever had in his life. He would take an overdose of prescription medication and was found dead in his cell on the 10th of October of 2010. Now, for Colette's family, this was a heavy blow, as it appeared that Paul Hutchinson had chosen not to live out his punishment. Colette's family really held on to hope that maybe one day he would confess to the murder and explain why he had taken away their loved one, because he never gave a reason. Paul Hutchinson had previously been on suicide watch while in prison, but he had been taken off this watch before his death. Colette's mother, Jackie, said, quote, "We are never, ever going to get closure because we never got answers, and we never will. He never showed any remorse, and he took the coward's way out." End quote. Separate from Paul sending these weird letters to police during their investigation and kind of taunting them with these letters, identifying himself anonymously as her killer. Like, separate from that, he actually lived a normal life. He was a community champion. He raised a family living within 5 miles of the scene of the crime. was a newspaper distributor and also became a school governor and charity worker. He had kids and had been married, and it's just crazy to me that he was able to live this seemingly normal life right by where he murdered this 16-year-old girl. I also just want to mention that one of the first people on the scene of the crime once police found Colette's body was her brother Mark. He had been driving down Thurlby Lane, which was the route that she would take to get to her boyfriend Russell's house, and he had noticed some police tape and police cars, so he immediately pulled over and ran to the tape. A police officer had tried to stop him, but Mark got through, where he saw his sister's body in the condition that she was left in, which is just so sad and traumatizing. Now, as I mentioned earlier in this video, I talked about how there was a man hiding out in a hut near the writing school, which ultimately ends up being Paul. Interestingly enough, this information is included in one of the anonymous letters written and sent to the police. Police weren't quite sure what to do with these letters. It wouldn't be the first time that somebody was just playing a sick, cruel joke, so they weren't sure if this was real or a hoax. But the letters did include some very interesting and vital information. One of the letters talked about hiding out in this hut while he was watching these young girls ride their horses. And when the police got the letter, they would go and search this hut or shed, and they did find a rag in there that contained human semen. And because of that, they became convinced that these letters were not a hoax and really were from the killer. So I wanted to include that information because there's something really creepy and fascinating about the fact that he would send these letters to the police. It kind of gives like Zodiac Killer vibes. If you're familiar with the Zodiac Killer, which you probably are, at least if you live in the United States, because that one is a very high profile case from California and remains unsolved to this day. So that concludes the case of Colette Aram. Please let me know your thoughts down below. I am also going to list 3 cases in a pinned comment down below, so please continue to comment on cases you would like to see covered. You may see them appear in the 13 Days of Halloween, and if not, you will see them shortly